So at the end of each year, I like to sit down and look through some of the work that I shot and just kind of be able to look at it sort of through a bird's eye view. I create a catalog for all of the images that I've shot throughout the entire year, which for 2024 was just about 12 terabytes of photos. I find this to be a really healthy practice as an artist and a photographer to be able to look back at my work and see what I gravitated towards throughout the year, what different kinds of photos I shot, what genres I really enjoyed shooting. It's really helpful to see for the year to come how you want to be able to display your work and what kinds of projects you want to be focusing on. Even on this YouTube channel, I'm able to bring you guys along on some of the different shoots that I do, but certainly not all of them. The photography camera is almost always in my hand, but the video camera is not. And oftentimes I do prioritize taking photos over making a specific video for here on the channel. I want to get in the habit more so of dissecting my own work here on the channel. I think it's a healthy practice for me, and also maybe it could be helpful for you guys as well to look at your work in a new way. I'm really proud of the work that I shot in 2024, and I want to be able to share some of my favorite photos and travels with you guys and chat a little bit about a few of my favorite different projects. So the first kind of category I want to talk about is travel photography. I was fortunate enough to go on several different amazing trips last year. Travel is really important to me and a huge part of why I love photography so much. Being able to bring the camera along and document a trip is one of my favorite things to do. First trip that I want to chat about is a trip that my girlfriend Jaden and I took to Guatemala early back in February of this year. It was an absolutely stunning trip. One of the coolest places I've ever been, and a place that not a lot of Americans have been. I shot tons of different photos on this trip to Guatemala, but a few of what I'll be focusing on will be from our time in Lake Alilan, which is a lake in the highlands of Guatemala. Now, this first image is sort of a sun-drenched photo of our Airbnb. The sunrises there were just unbelievably beautiful, and I felt like this photo kind of captured the serenity and also the calmness of the actual place that we stayed. The lake itself is one of the most beautiful places I've ever been, and I wanted to obviously try to do that justice. I love this photo where the foreground is a bit silhouetted, and towards the end of the day when the shadows got really long, the sun started to sparkle on the lake, which I thought was pretty cool. So I captured this really contrasty photo of both the shadows of all the plants and the afternoon sunlight hitting the lake. There's also quite a bit of smog around the lake, which sort of added to the look and feel of this image. And this is one of my favorites from the entire trip. Obviously, swimming is a huge part of this trip, so we spent a lot of our days just hanging out on this beautiful dock and swimming. And I captured this photo of Jaden swimming, and the volcano is right in the background. This photo just feels very free, and I think it captures really well how it felt to be there. And I hold this photo very near and dear to my heart. I took quite a few road trips last year, both near and far, and some of my favorite photos I took were actually right here in my own backyard in California. I took a solo road trip up the coast right about when summer was starting to hit, and I took a few photos that I really love. I'm going to be adding those to my photography coast book that's hopefully going to be coming out next year. This photo is near Morro Bay, which is one of my favorite places to go to. And I love the shadows in this photo. I especially love, if you look really closely, how the light is hitting all the rocks while there's still some shadows on some of the other rocks. I really enjoy shooting in direct sunlight like this, and I feel like this photo captures the moment nicely. This photo was at a pretty remote beach in Northern California, kind of near some Air Force bases, and I camped here for the night. This was towards the end of the day and sunset when I had just pulled up and set up my campsite, and I captured this photo on a macro lens, so you can see there's a lot of detail. And I love how the trees sort of framed the image with the hills in the background and the beautiful clouds, also the light hitting the actual branches on the tree. I thought this was a really cool photo. One of my favorites from that trip. On an entirely separate trip, I was heading up to the Bay Area to shoot a job, and I had a few extra days, so I wanted to stop in Big Sur on my way up. And Big Sur is one of my favorite places. If you guys have watched this channel at all, you know it holds a special place in my heart for me. Along the California coast, there's really nothing more beautiful than an afternoon in Big Sur. I decided to camp here for the night, and it was a really memorable sunset for me. I captured some pretty cool photos with a long lens. So this was 120 millimeters on the GFX. The way that the Big Sur roads are constructed, I really wanted to capture that and sort of the effortless feeling that you get when you're driving down the coast. I also snapped this photo, which is probably one of my favorites I've ever taken in Big Sur. If you look closely, you can see the shadow of this beautiful tree house that's overlooking the ocean. I love the stark contrast between the darker parts of the image where it's almost a shadow and then the brighter parts of the ocean where the sun is hitting. I love this really vast difference within the photo of the dark blacks and then, the light coming in from the left side of the image. It's not a typical way to shoot a photo or to frame it necessarily, but I really love playing with shadows and seeing what I can do, and this is one of my favorites. These next two I also thought paired really nicely. Here we have some cows just grazing on the beautiful hills of Big Sur up in the mountains, and I also captured this photo at sunset with the ocean in the background and these incredible light rays hitting all the different hills in Big Sur. That was a pretty incredible trip and one that I will not forget. I try to make an annual, if not a couple times a year, trip up to the Central Coast, and I love taking photos up there. So in just about peak summer, my girlfriend and I set out for a 20-day road trip. We started our journey in Washington after we saw a concert with some friends, and we drove all the way back down to LA, taking our sweet time. We hit 4 different states, including Colorado, Wyoming, Idaho, and Utah. This was one of the best, if not the best, road trips I've ever been on in my life. And that's saying something because I feel like I'm always driving around doing stuff. But I feel like also the images I was able to capture on this trip really felt like I was there looking back at them. And I hope you guys feel that as well. I had the Mamiya 7 II on this road trip, so that was a pretty special camera to bring along for a trip like this. I love shooting 6x7 landscape photos and travel photos, so this was pretty fun for me. This first photo is in Moab. I love the shadows and the clouds in this photo. Moab just has such beautiful skies when there's clouds around. You're able to get this kind of spotty light, and I really love how this one turned out. This is actually on the way up when my dad and I decided to camp for the night on a pretty remote beach in Northern California. And this is the view from our campsite. We had an amazing time, and this is also just kind of a memorable photo for me to remember the memory. This is a random photo in Portland, actually, on that same road trip. I saw this beautiful series Defender, so obviously I had to pull over and take a photo of it. I love how the greens complement each other in this photo, both on the truck and in the trees. It was just a gorgeous sunny afternoon day in Portland. We spent a lot of time in Colorado and Wyoming on this trip, and these next few images, both in Grand Teton National Park and down in southwestern Colorado, are some of my favorites from the whole trip. This is our camp setup most nights with my 4Runner, watching the sunset. It was such an amazing trip. This is a beautiful hike that we did all the way up to some pretty remote alpine lakes in Colorado. This hike in general was quite a tough one, if I remember right. I remember getting up to that lake and jumping in the water. It felt so amazing to just relax and enjoy some snacks. This hike was one for the books. This is probably my favorite photo from that entire road trip. This is a photo of a fisherman. It looks like he's tying some sort of fishing knot or something like that to be able to cast out. And I love that I captured him sort of in the moment. Obviously, there's a beautiful backdrop of the Grand Tetons behind him. And it made me really interested in fishing. I've never really been a huge fisherman, but it's something I've always wanted to try. And I do feel like, obviously, in a location like this, it's very beautiful to photograph. So I love this photo. This is a photo from the 4th of July in Washington. We found some swimming holes and camped with some friends for a couple days. I think also for me, this kind of just encapsulates the beautiful weekend that we had together. I have very fond memories of spending time with friends up in the Pacific Northwest, and this photo does just that for me. Here's one more photo of another campsite that we had in the mountains of Colorado. There's nothing better than being outdoors and just being able to relax by a campsite with a fire. Dutch Harbor in Alaska was also a favorite trip of mine this year. You guys saw the video that I put together from that trip, but I'll quickly share a few of my favorites. This is a photo of one of the cranes that they use to offload the shipping containers. I love the kind of dichotomy of it being at the edge of the ocean with mountains surrounding it. Love the textures and colors of this photo as well. This is a photo on top of one of the mountain passes in Dutch Harbor. I thought it was amazing this particular day, just how incredible the light looked. It looked like it was something out of a movie. The sun sort of broke through these clouds. It was just shining on the nearby rivers. Such a beautiful scene, and this is one of my favorite photos from that entire trip. I also love the detail of this particular image. These are king crab traps. Obviously, a huge part of being in that area is fishing for king crab and other kinds of fish as well. I think what kind of stuck out to me in this photo is how they were all stacked so neatly, and also the different colors, how they all work together. The buoys and the ropes, everything feels perfectly but also imperfectly in place, and I liked how it all was laid out. One of my favorite jobs of the year was getting asked by National Geographic to head out to Iceland for 10 days. That was just an unbelievable experience. I also made a pretty cool video about that trip if you guys want to check that out. But some of the photos I took on that are still some of my favorite landscape photos to date. Iceland is just such a unique country in the sense that you really feel like you're at the edge of the earth. And a lot of these photos to me definitely feel like that. That was the goal in taking them, is trying to capture obviously how it felt to be there. We only got one sunset and one sunrise the whole trip. The rest of it was rainy and cloudy. But these two photos are some of my favorites from the trip for sure. I think mainly because of the sunlight and being able to sort of play with the colors from the sun. But I also got some pretty cool photos when we were traveling. So here's a photo of a beautiful waterfall. Love that the person is just right there in the shadow. I love the scale of this photo. This was shot on a 500mm lens, so it's very compressed. I actually really enjoy shooting on lenses like this, so it's got me thinking about adding more of a telephoto lens to my arsenal. And this final photo of this glacier at sunset, this is actually very far away. We were on the boat itself, but being able to take a photo of the colors and the light and just seeing glimpses of the glacier at the bottom, it's a pretty beautiful photo, and one that I would love to get printed someday. So moving on to some portraits and some lifestyle work. This photo is one of my favorites. This was from a trip actually to Maine a couple months ago for some fall colors. This is a photo of Jaden just tightening up her pants, and it kind of looks obviously like she's tying her shoe, but I loved the way the light was hitting. And I tried to capture this as quickly as I could without her noticing. And I just love this moment. It feels very natural and candid, and that's obviously the goal when you're taking lifestyle photos. One of my favorite lifestyle sort of editorial projects from the year was getting the opportunity to shoot with the Utah Jazz head coach. This was probably back in mid-summer or so. I got the opportunity to fly to Utah for the day and shoot him for a clothing brand. He was such a nice guy, and being able to shoot more editorial work like this is something that I'm definitely looking to do in 2025. I love this one of him in the locker room, just, striking a pose. I used flash for this photo, which I think turned out really nice. And I also love this photo of him on the basketball court, just shooting a jump shot. A flash is really nice for photos like this because I love the way that it sort of illuminates the ceiling. But it's not too bright to the point where it looks like it's artificially lit. So that's definitely the goal with photos like this. I love this photo that I shot back in August for All Trails. This was up in Russian River area, so a bit north of San Francisco Bay Area. And I used a flash for this photo as well, but I brought down the exposure so it sort of darkened the background. And I definitely want to try utilizing more strobe in my work going forward. This is a pretty cool portrait and one that I'm happy to include in my portfolio. I took a trip up to Santa Barbara with one of my friends, Jacob, back in late summer, early fall, and he's an amazing surfer, so we obviously wanted to try to shoot some photos of him surfing. The waves were pretty terrible that day, but we nonetheless got a few pretty cool photos. I love this one of him ripping with the waves. Obviously, it's not a very big wave, but I love the motion in it, and I love the black and white, especially for this photo. It looks really nice. I also love this portrait of him. Right after he got out of the water, the sun was still illuminating his face, and I love this portrait. It feels very intimate and relaxed. I also did a video about my camp shoot up in Sequoia, but this is also one of my favorite shoots of the year. I love this photo specifically. Love the styling of this, and I think also the texture of the rocks and the way that I shot it. It feels very immersive, which is cool. I want to experiment more with shooting with wide lenses. I think that really kind of draws you in on this particular photo. And again, the styling is amazing. These next two are just two photos of everyone hanging out on the river and swimming. I've noticed that I really do like to take photos of people just hanging out along a river or a lake. There's something about just how relaxing it feels, I think, in this photo in particular, with everyone just hanging out doing their own thing. I love how candid it feels. In terms of portraits, this is one of my favorite shoots of the year. I shot out in Malibu for an afternoon with this model Brit, and I love how these photos turned out. Again, they feel very effortless, which I think for me is something I definitely always try to go towards with photography. And I love all the different looks we were able to get in this shoot. There was a bit of clouds, a bit of sun, and I love how all these look particularly together. I think, when you're looking at images next to each other, I think that it can really add a lot and tell a bit more of a story when they're sort of laid out next to each other. Now, looking back at this year, man, what an incredible year it was, and one that I definitely don't take for granted. I feel so lucky to be able to do this for a living and to be able to shoot so many incredible photos and travel to different places, meet some really cool people along the way. Obviously thankful for you guys as well, for this channel, the opportunity to share my work. I don't take that lightly, so thank you for all the support over the years, and thank you for allowing me to share some of my photography journey with you guys. If you're interested in checking out any more work that I might have from last year, I will share my website link down below, which I've updated with some new projects and travel folders, which you guys should go take a look at. Speaking of which, I wanted to wrap up today's video by chatting about today's sponsor, which is Squarespace. Now, as you guys know by now, Squarespace is a longtime supporter of this YouTube channel. And when I think about making any sort of creative website for my photography or my filmmaking, or really anything that requires technical knowledge, it's really nice to know that Squarespace takes care of all of this when it comes to designing your own website. You don't have to know how to code. You don't have to know how to lay things out. All you have to do is just drag and drop your images, create different gallery pages. You can also sell e-commerce products and even book appointments using their software. I find that Squarespace is just the easiest way to make any sort of creative website, and I suggest you guys go check them out. There'll be a link down in the description if you guys want to check out Squarespace for yourself and receive 10% off your first website or domain purchase. Thanks so much to Squarespace, as always, for sponsoring this episode, and thanks you guys for watching. We'll see you in the next one.